On my second day living with my in-laws after losing my job, my mother-in-law dumped my suitcase onto the driveway and said, "We took you in out of pity, not because you belong here." Her husband didn't even look at me. No man should rely on a woman to eat. I picked up my clothes in silence while my wife watched from the window. That night, I left one final item in their mailbox, with a note they won't forget. When I lost my job, I didn't cry. I didn't panic. I just sat there in my car outside the building, holding the cardboard box with the few things from my desk. It felt surreal. I'd been working there for almost 7 years. I trained new hires. I met every deadline. I stayed late when I didn't have to. But none of that mattered when they shut the department down. They told us we were being let go due to restructuring. I didn't even have the energy to argue. I just nodded, shook someone's hand out of habit, and left. I thought Lena would be upset. I called her from the parking lot. She was quiet. Too quiet. She asked, "What are you going to do?" Not, "How are you?" or "Are you okay?" Just that. I told her I had savings and I'd start applying right away. That it would be okay. We lived in a small apartment in the city. Rent was high, and I'd been the one paying it for the most part. Lena worked part-time at a bookstore and used most of her money on her student loans. She was always late paying them, and she'd ask me to help sometimes. I didn't mind. I figured that's what you do when you're married. You help each other. But that changed fast after I lost the job. Within a week, I saw her start to pull back. I'd be sitting at the kitchen table, scrolling through job listings, and she'd be in the bedroom with the door closed. I could hear her talking on the phone to her mom, whispering sometimes. I caught little phrases like "he's trying" and "I don't know how long." That kind of thing. I told her I was working on interviews, that I had leads. She nodded but didn't really say much. Then, one night, she sat down with me and said we needed to move out. The lease was up in a month, and she didn't want to renew it. I asked where we'd go. She said her parents had offered to let us stay at their house, just for a while. I didn't like the idea. I'd met them a few times before the wedding. They never really looked at me. Her dad asked what my credit score was the first time I came to dinner. Her mom asked if I knew how to fix a water heater. They weren't exactly warm, but I didn't have a better plan. We couldn't afford the rent anymore. So I agreed. We drove to their place that weekend. They live in a large 2-story house in a gated neighborhood, the kind where every lawn is exactly the same height, and people peek out through blinds to see who's pulling into the driveway. Judith, her mom, opened the door and didn't smile, just looked me up and down and said, "You're lucky we have a spare room." Carl, her dad, barely nodded at me. He was watching something on TV and didn't even get up. The guest room was clean but cold. No pictures, no blankets, just a plain mattress and a closet that smelled like mothballs. Lena acted like it was fine. "We'll get back on our feet," she said. Just a little while. But the very next morning, I could feel it start. I came into the kitchen and Judith was wiping down the counter like it had personally offended her. She didn't say good morning, just asked, "Did you eat?" I said no. She looked at me and said, "We don't usually cook for guests. Hope you're okay with cereal." Carl came in later, poured himself coffee, and said, "So what's the plan? You gonna be working soon or just hanging around here?" It wasn't even 9 a.m. on my first full day there. That day, I spent hours applying for jobs. Anything. Temp work, warehouse stuff, online gigs. I refreshed my inbox like a crazy person. Got one interview scheduled for the next morning. Lena was proud. Said she hoped it went well. But again, she said it from across the room, like we weren't really on the same team anymore. The next morning, I woke up early, shaved, wore my only clean dress shirt, and took the bus. The interview went okay. Not perfect, but it was something. When I got back, I knew something was wrong before I even got to the door. The front door was closed. Locked. That in itself was strange, because Judith left it open for Lena's brother every morning when he stopped by for coffee. But today it was locked. I rang the bell. No answer. I rang again. Waited. I walked around to the side of the house. That's when I saw it. My suitcase. The big gray one I'd used when we moved in. It was dumped out onto the driveway. Not just sitting there dumped. The zipper was half open, and my clothes were scattered all over. Shirts, socks, underwear. My charger. A belt. Even a deodorant stick rolling near the curb. Judith was standing by the garage, holding a small trash bag. She looked right at me, didn't blink. Then she said, "We took you in out of pity, not because you belong here." Just like that. No emotion. like she was reading from a script. She tossed the bag near the pile. I saw my toothbrush and shampoo inside. I asked where Lena was. Judith didn't answer. Then Carl came out the front door, looked at me like I was a stray dog digging through his trash. He said, "No man should rely on a woman to eat." Then he walked back in. Didn't wait for a response. Door shut behind him. I stood there for a while. Didn't move. I was too ashamed to cry and too angry to speak. So I just crouched down and started folding. Some of the clothes had tire marks. One shirt was wet from something in the driveway. I packed it all back in, silent. I zipped up the suitcase and just stood there. That's when I saw Lena. She was in the upstairs window, watching. She didn't wave. She didn't open the window or yell anything. She just stood there, one hand resting on the glass, like she was waiting for me to leave. She didn't come down. Not to help. Not to speak. Not even to say goodbye. I walked away. Found a cheap motel near the highway. It was $42 a night. I had about $1,300 in the bank. If I skipped eating and didn't drive too much, I could last 3, maybe 4 weeks. That night, I didn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling fan and felt like a ghost, like I'd been erased from my own life. But before I checked in, I made one stop. I drove back to the house, parked across the street with my headlights off. The house was dark, quiet. I walked to the mailbox and left a single envelope. Inside was a copy of our marriage license, Lena's notarized signature from when we opened our joint savings account, and a short handwritten note. It said, "You won't have to pity me anymore. Just return what's mine." No threats, no anger, just facts. This wasn't about begging anymore. It was about what I'd built, what I'd earned, what they thought they could strip from me while I was down. This isn't over. Not even close. 3 days after I left the envelope in their mailbox, I got a notification from the bank. Our joint savings account had been closed. Not drained. Closed. No warning, no transfer request, just gone. I called the bank, gave them my details, and they said the account had been shut down with both account holders' signatures. I asked how that was possible. I hadn't signed anything. The guy on the phone said, "We have a signed closure form on file. It's already processed." I asked for a copy. He said he'd email it. When I opened it later that day, I felt my hands start shaking. It was my signature. But it wasn't. It was a near-perfect copy. The slant, the pressure, even the way I looped my R, all faked. I sat in that cheap motel room and stared at the screen for 20 minutes, not moving. I thought about calling the police, but I didn't even know where to begin. It was her word against mine. And deep down, I already knew who had done it. Judith. Lena wouldn't have been able to forge my signature that well. She never handled our paperwork, never even signed a check. But Judith worked in real estate for 20 years. She bragged about her attention to detail. I remembered her saying once at dinner, "I can sign my husband's name better than he can." At the time, we all laughed. Now I wasn't laughing. That money, $8 for 32. That was everything I'd managed to save since college. I'd been putting money away slowly for years. Every bonus, every tax return. It was supposed to be for a down payment someday. Maybe a used car. A safety net. And they just took it. I tried calling Lena. Straight to voicemail. I texted her, "Why did you close the account?" No reply. An hour later, I got a short message back. It was her money too. "You're not entitled to anything. Stop harassing me." That word, entitled, broke something in me. She never asked about that account. Never put more than $100 into it, ever. She'd call it the backup. But now she wanted half. Or maybe all of it. I didn't even know. I didn't text her again. Instead, I started digging. I went through old emails. Found copies of every deposit I'd ever made into that account. Pay stubs, tax returns. I kept everything. I wasn't thinking about revenge yet. I was thinking about surviving. But the more I looked at it all, the angrier I got. Because they didn't just steal my money. They were rewriting the story. They were painting me as some leech. Some failed husband who needed to be thrown out. I started thinking about that moment on the driveway. Judith's face, Carl's words, Lena's silence. It didn't feel like a spontaneous thing. It felt rehearsed, like they had been waiting for the chance. Then the second twist came. I went to check my email. I had set up alerts for job postings. But instead, I saw a message from the HR department of a company I'd interviewed with earlier that week. Subject: Concerns regarding your application. Inside was a single paragraph. "We received troubling information that we believe may relate to your character and recent behavior. As such, We are withdrawing your candidacy. We wish you the best. No explanation. No details. I emailed back asking for clarification. No response. That job had been my best lead. It was the only one that paid more than minimum wage. I started panicking. What troubling information? Who was saying what? The next day, I got another rejection. Same tone. Vague but stiff. It clicked. Someone was contacting these companies. Someone was trying to cut me off before I could get back on my feet. I created a fake email and applied to a new job using slightly altered info. New phone number, no LinkedIn profile, different personal email. Just to test. 2 days later, I got a call. I had an interview. That proved it. Someone was watching my real applications and sabotaging them. I went quiet after that. I stopped using any of my real accounts. I started working under the table, warehouse gigs, moving jobs, sometimes online surveys just to keep myself fed. I showered at the gym, slept in the motel, then in my car when money ran low. Every time I passed a mirror, I didn't recognize myself. I'd lost weight. My beard was patchy. I looked worn out. But something in me hardened. They wanted me erased. Humiliated. They wanted me to disappear quietly. So they could pretend none of it happened. Lena could say I just left. Judith could tell her friends I couldn't handle real life. Carl could go back to drinking and saying things about weak men. I wasn't going to let that happen. The revenge didn't come all at once. It started with quiet planning. Screenshots. Voice recordings. Documenting everything. I stopped texting. I stopped explaining. I just observed. I listened. That's when I learned something I wasn't supposed to. One day, while working a temp gig setting up a convention booth, I ran into someone who used to work with Carl. Small world. The guy said Carl hadn't worked a real job in years, that he'd been cashing in favors from friends to keep up appearances. Said he lost his license for something embarrassing, and Judith had to clean it up. I asked carefully. Got just enough details. That was the crack. They weren't untouchable. They had secrets too, and I'd been quiet long enough. A week after I learned about Carl's past, I started digging deeper. Quietly. I used a burner laptop I bought secondhand from a guy at a gas station. No sign-ins, no real name. Just one purpose, to watch and collect. I searched public records first. It took a while, but I found it. Carl had lost his contractor's license 5 years ago for falsifying work permits and cutting corners on safety inspections. One of his projects had mold and wiring issues so bad that the city had to step in. There was a quiet settlement, and it never made the news. But it was there. His name, the citation, the fine he paid, $17,000. That's why he hadn't worked in years. That's why he always barked about real men working with their hands. It wasn't pride. It was cover. I saved all of it. But the twist I didn't expect came next. One night, I checked Lena's Instagram. I hadn't looked in weeks. I assumed she blocked me. But she didn't. Not completely. She had posted a photo 2 nights earlier. It was her at dinner. A fancy restaurant. A cocktail glass, a candle, her hand resting on the table, next to another hand. A man's hand. The caption, when someone sees your worth without asking for proof. That hit harder than I expected. Not because I thought she'd wait for me, but because it confirmed something I hadn't dared to believe until then. This had been in motion long before I lost the job. I zoomed in on the photo. The man's watch, his hand, the style. I didn't recognize him at first. But later that week, while scrolling through Carl's old company photos, ones he still hadn't taken down from a dusty web domain, I found him. His name was Peter. He used to be Carl's junior partner. Worked under him until the license scandal happened. After that, Peter left and started his own firm. It started making sense. Lena was seeing him, or had been. Judith must have encouraged it. Carl probably saw it as a step up. A real man who could take over where I'd failed. Maybe it was revenge for how I embarrassed them by showing up jobless. Maybe it was their plan all along. That same week, I got a message through a job board. A company in a nearby city asked if I could come in for a part-time remote position. I used the fake identity again, and I took the job. It didn't pay much, but it was clean, legal, and enough to get me into a weekly rental studio. Not much bigger than a closet, but it had a door that locked and a place to sit and think. I kept watching. Lena started posting more. Judith commented under every photo. So proud of you. You deserve the best. Love wins. Carl didn't post, but I found out something else through one of those public contractor forums. He'd been trying to rebuild his name by consulting, off the books, unlicensed. That was illegal. He had a burner business account under a fake LLC. I traced it back to the same address he used for his home, just with a small change in the name. It was sloppily done. He was getting payments from small-time developers who didn't care about legality as long as the job was cheap. I reported it anonymously. Just once. Just enough to plant the seed. But the real twist didn't come from them. It came from someone I never expected. One afternoon, I was sitting outside the library using the Wi-Fi, checking job emails, when I saw a message come through an old, barely used Facebook account. From someone named Rachel R. The message said, "You don't know me, but I know Lena. We used to work together. I think you should see something." I hesitated. Thought it might be a scam. But then I clicked on the photo she sent. It was a screenshot of a group chat. A conversation between Rachel, Lena, and someone else. Rachel had written, "You sure you want to go through with this? He seems like he's trying." Lena replied, "Trying doesn't matter. I'm not carrying dead weight anymore. My mom says I deserve a man who already made it, not one still figuring it out." That was sent 2 weeks before she asked me to move into her parents' house. 2 weeks. It hit me like a truck. She knew. She knew what they were going to do. She brought me there like bait. She let me think it was a favor when really, it was a setup. A slow way to crush whatever dignity I had left. So I'd walk away quietly and let her move on without drama. Judith didn't just enable it. She orchestrated it. Carl didn't just insult me. He used my pain to distract from his own failures. They had tried to erase me, professionally and personally. But they didn't know how much I remembered. How much I kept. They didn't know I was still watching. They didn't know I was just getting started. I didn't rush it. That's the part no one ever talks about. Real revenge takes time. Not rage. Not noise. Just silence, patience, and a plan. It started with Carl. After I reported his fake LLC, I waited. The state licensing board didn't act right away. But I knew how to keep pushing without leaving fingerprints. I sent emails from different Wi-Fi spots. Sent screenshots of his contractor work with no license attached. Even pretended to be a worried homeowner asking, "Is this legal?" 2 months later, his fake company got flagged for inspection. Someone must have tipped him off. He shut it all down in a panic. But it was too late. The city issued a fine, $11,000. He tried to fight it, but it triggered an audit of his home finances. That audit found the hidden money, the one Judith had kept off the books for years. Turns out, she'd been managing money for a few family members, helping them avoid taxes. She thought she was clever, thought it didn't leave a trail, but it did. Within weeks, the IRS froze one of their accounts. Judith had always bragged about her perfect credit, about how smart she was with money. But when the letters started showing up in the mail, she stopped posting online. No more photos of family brunch. No more humble brags. She was quiet now. Then I turned to Lena. I didn't try to get her back. That part of me had died months ago. But I needed her to know what she did. So I filed a civil suit. Not for the money. Not really. I knew I wouldn't get it. But I filed a claim for theft and fraud. I included the forged signature from the bank closure, the text messages, the group chat screenshot Rachel had sent me. I attached proof of every deposit I had ever made into that joint account. At first, Lena laughed it off. She didn't even show up to the first hearing. But when her lawyers saw the documentation and the notarized paperwork I had from our old account, he told her the truth. This wouldn't go away quietly. She offered to settle. I rejected the first offer, then the second. On the third offer, I agreed, but only under one condition. She had to admit to what she did. In writing. And she did. That confession is now public record. She admitted to forging my signature. Admitted to taking the money. Admitted that her mother encouraged her to separate finances and use the opportunity when I lost my job. I didn't get all the money back, but I got enough. Enough to move out of that cramped rental. Enough to pay off the debt I'd been drowning in. Enough to breathe. And more importantly, enough to walk into a new job without fear. I now work as an assistant project manager for a small construction company. It's not glamorous, but it's stable. I work with good people. Nobody throws me out if I'm tired or quiet. Nobody watches me through a window like I'm trash on the curb. One day, after work, I went back to that old neighborhood. Not to do anything reckless. Just to look. Their house was for sale. The grass was dying. Paint chipping near the garage. A foreclosure notice stapled to the side fence. They lost everything. Carl and Judith were living in a rented condo now, according to a public address search. And Lena? She'd broken up with Peter. He'd left her not long after the civil suit. Maybe the drama was too much. Maybe he finally saw her clearly. Last I heard, she moved to another state. She never apologized. She never reached out. And honestly, I didn't need her to. Because here's the truth, I wasn't perfect either. I let myself become quiet in that marriage. I let things slide. I avoided hard talks. I thought being useful was enough. That if I paid bills and said the right things, love would stay. It didn't. I had to learn how to build again. From nothing. Not just a job or a place to live, but a voice, a spine. Now, I help others who've been through the same. I volunteer twice a month with a legal aid group that helps people recover stolen wages and fight back against silent fraud. I don't talk about my story much. I let others do the talking. But when I see someone come in, shaking with shame, holding their last pay stub, I just sit beside them and say, "You're not crazy. And you're not done." And if they need proof, I show them the receipt. From the day Lena wired back the last check, with a memo line that read, "As ordered by court." That was the only time she ever said sorry. And it was good enough.